And we aren't sure exactly why, but the statistics prove that being married makes you more likely to be healthy and it makes you more likely to be wealthy. So, guys, maybe you should head right out after this show and get a ring for somebody. Jennifer Marshall with the Heritage Foundation has been crunching these numbers, and she's here with us today. Jennifer, welcome to Smart Life.
Thank you. It's great to be with you, Gina.
Now, married men and women have higher incomes than their single counterparts, and married households report a much higher value of their assets. Additional to that, married adults are reportedly healthier than single adults, and married couples are more likely to be homeowners. How in the world, what are the differences in this? I mean, this makes no sense to most people, especially with the trends we see in our culture today. What is it that makes these things so?
Well, you're exactly right. It improves the financial outcomes for men. Men make more money when they're married, on average about 20% more in wages by one study showing that. And it's especially good news for children. Children who are born and raised in an intact family are more than 5 times, I should say it the other way around, that a child who's born outside of marriage is 5 times more likely to face poverty and dependence on welfare than are his peers who are raised in an intact family. So it's important for men, it's important for women, and it's important for children. And one simple explanation that a lot of people have examined is just the fact that you're combining resources and there's division of labor and all those economic reasons why you can be more efficient and have more productivity and so on. I think there's also some relational dynamics that when you're invested in somebody else, you're more concerned about your health. You've got somebody who's looking out for your health with you. Those kinds of things. Relational benefits really are important for a variety of things that are of note in the public policy world.
Yeah, it's amazing to me because I think these statistics aren't widely known, and through no fault of yours, I know, because you have definitely written and talked about this extensively. But why do you think it is that society seems to be almost going the other direction? I mean, you watch now, and I hear people, in high-profile situations saying things like this. We lived together before we were married, so we thought everything would go well. I mean, as if that's what they believe works for marriage, when in fact the statistics are exactly opposite that.
That's right. Cohabiting before marriage makes a marriage much more at risk of breaking up. And the facts are that we're living in the wake of the sexual revolution, of the feminist movement, and that has changed the dynamics of relationships quite a bit. And it's made the path towards marriage a lot more difficult than it was in the past. I wrote about this in a book called Now and Not Yet, Making Sense of Single Life in the 21st Century, that came out a few years ago. And I was particularly interested in how and why that path towards marriage had gotten more rocky. Romance has been difficult since time immemorial, since the beginning of male and female relationships. That's been a given. But it's become particularly more difficult, I would say, in the last half century for couples to navigate their way towards a stable and healthy relationship of marriage. And that's partly to do because of these dynamics that have changed in culture. We don't have a culture that is as supportive of marriage anymore.
Yeah, we sure don't. And at the same time, I notice a lot of the mental health issue that people confront, people that I just know or people that I've come across in my profession, have to do with their obsession with getting married. And I also know that a lot of marriages result with thinking, one person in particular that I'm close to just decided it was time for him to get married. He just needed to get married. And so he got married, and it was a huge mistake. It was the wrong person. It was too fast. It was all the things that you don't want to happen. And it's resulted in a lot of misery. So how do you, especially being the author of such an important book on this matter, how do you talk to people who tend to obsess over marriage, especially holidays like Valentine's Day can bring that out in people, and to keep them from making mistakes thinking it's time, or all their friends are married, or gosh, I hate to spend another Valentine's Day alone, those kinds of things?
Well, marriage is hard. There is no doubt about that. It's hard in its internal dynamics. It's hard in a culture that's not very friendly and supportive necessarily towards permanent monogamous relationship called marriage. And part of that reason is that we have gotten confused about what marriage is, and it's been kind of devolved into this idea of a loving commitment that will last as long as the emotions of both spouses last. Well, I happen not to be married, but everybody that is tells me those emotions ebb and flow. They are not always as strong as on your wedding day. And that matters. So the idea of what marriage is matters quite a bit, not just for public policy, the realm I deal with most, but it matters in our understanding of how to pursue it at a personal level. And so marriage is a private relationship, public significance. Marriage exists for specific, in particular, the welfare of the next generation. But how does it provide for the welfare and the care of the next generation? By the commitment that the spouses make towards one another, towards the other's interest. And so it's kind of the epitome of what it means to be selfless and committed wholly to another, and the commitment that that forms then to the next generation. That very intimate discussion and intimate matter has quite a bit of significance for our society as a whole, and for even our public policy, because we see that the breakdown of marriage, the erosion of marriage that we've seen over the last few decades, has led to increasing rates of dependency on government and rising welfare costs associated with that, not to mention a lot of heartache and misery.
Yeah, and it's good that you mentioned that there's a lot of discussion right now over the conjugal definition of marriage, over to what relationships marriage should apply, and you would think just on its surface that if everybody's committed, no matter what their commitment is, that it would be better and less expensive for society, because you would think there'd be less promiscuity, those kinds of things. From a public policy standpoint, speak to that.
Well, there are a lot of relationships that each of us have that are loving and committed and last over a long period of time. That could describe, relationships with siblings and friends and parents and so on. But the commitment that is made in marriage is a distinct one, and it's made distinctly because of the possibility of there being children as an outcome of that relationship. And that takes a special commitment over the long haul, over the permanency of a lifetime. And that's the ideal that the marriage laws that we have in this land have upheld. Now, we've seen erosion in that idea. We've seen no-fault divorce come in several decades ago, and now we're seeing the redefinition of marriage. But we need to recover an understanding. The reason that we're having those questions, those changes in public policy, is because I think we've lost an understanding of what marriage is. So at the Heritage Foundation, we've actually put together a resource that can help people learn to converse more about these ideas. And you can find that at heritage.org/marriage.
And I'm so glad that Heritage Foundation always on the cutting edge, really, of public policy, because a lot of things that sound good or even sound charitable or even sound compassionate are very difficult to put into practice from a public policy standpoint. And that's where Heritage is always on the lookout for those sorts of things. Jennifer, tell us a little bit more about upcoming work that the Heritage Foundation and you personally are working on, and also where we can find all of that.
Well, sure. A lot of the statistics that you started out with can be found at familyfacts.org. That's familyfacts.org, and it's got easy-to-use charts and graphs and summary statements there. Great if you're doing a speech or talking to even a small group about the significance in religious practice trends, family, marriage, and so on. One of the things that we're really concerned about is restoring a good understanding, a solid understanding of what marriage is, why it matters for public policy, and what are the consequences of losing the understanding that marriage is a permanent, exclusive, monogamous relationship between a man and a woman. So we're having a big conversation about that right now. And we're also looking a lot at religious liberty, particularly when marriage is redefined. In those jurisdictions where it's been redefined, we're seeing clashes with religious liberty and the freedom of individuals that continue standing up and speaking the truth that marriage is the union of a man and a woman.
And those websites, heritage.org, Heritage Foundation Director of Domestic Policy, Jennifer Marshall.